Hello and welcome to Open Minds UFO Radio. I am your host, Alejandro Rojas, and I have with me Martin Knucklehead Willis.
Well, I was wondering when it was going to be this time. Knucklehead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that fits with our conversation. Yeah.
Exactly. You were just talking about some knucklehead things you did, and I thought that was kind of funny. So why not call you a knucklehead this time?
I mean, when you're doing a show, there's this thing called record. You're supposed to push that button.
Yeah.
Well,
you forgot to do that. I've forgotten to do that before. I've done a whole, I don't remember who it was with. I think the first time I did that might have been with Grant Cameron, where we did the whole show and then we had to do it over again. Luckily, Grant and I, especially back then, talked a lot more, and he was really cool with it. So I got lucky.
Well, Grant loves to talk. You know, I mean, he can put out 5,000 words in 2 hours.
Yeah. But didn't I do that with us once? We did a whole beginning and I forgot to record?
I do recall. So you're a knucklehead, too.
I am a knucklehead. Yep, takes one to know one. But, just so that's some behind the scenes with podcasting, and other podcasters probably have similar stories. If you do, you can share that with us. But which is funny when people do these podcasts and then forget to record. Wah, wah.
Yeah. Wow.
All right, so let's get into a couple things. Let's get into the show. You're listening to Open Minds UFO Radio, where we cover news in credible UFO news in a journalistic manner. So we cover the substantiated, credible information, and if it's more speculative, like last week's show, we'll share that with you. That it's if the information is anecdotal or more sketchy. So we'll let you know about that. The beginning of the show is news, so we talk about the latest UFO news of the week, and then the last two segments are the interview. So if you're here because you saw the name on the interview and you're like, oh, I want to hear that interview, feel free to skip ahead. However, you're going to miss some of the great news because there's always UFO news. So we cover the headlines that are out there, and there always is some exciting headlines. I do also want to say, and I forget to do this too often, thank you so much to my Patreon patrons. So, of course, you can go on there. It's a way for you to say, hey, I support you, and give me, as much as little as $1 a month or more. And anything's appreciated because, as Martin can attest to, it's expensive to do this. And, we're taking time away from other jobs and stuff we could do that pays money. And in fact, I might have to start looking for a job. I might have to reduce some of my UFO stuff. So, in fact, if you need a PR person or a corporate trainer or something like that and have a cool job, especially in Southern California, because I want to move out to Southern California soon, let me know. Or something that can be remote. If you think, hey, man, Alejandro would be perfect for this job, let me know. Otherwise, I do want to thank my recent patrons. So many of you are joining, and $1 a month is, I thank you so much, even for anything you can do. I'm so, so grateful. So I want to thank Kim, Kevin, Jamie, Ron, April, Frode, Mark, Corey, Mark, Robert, and Matt. Thank you so much, some of my more recent patrons. Thanks for helping out.
Yeah.
Yep, very
Excellent.
nice. So the interview this week, I'm very excited about this interview because it's a good buddy that I haven't interviewed for a while, and that is Chuck Zukowski. So any of you longtime listeners, in fact, even though it's been a while, he was one of the people I interviewed early on quite a bit because he was kind of my, paranormal investigation buddy. So we would talk quite often, and In fact, I was one of the first to interview him about all this Alien Highway stuff. And now he's got a TV show on a travel channel called Alien Highway.
Huh.
Where it's him, his son, and this woman who used to be part of Paranormal State, and Heather Taddy. So she's a paranormal investigator. Many of you, Paranormal State ran for a long time. That was a good ghost hunting show. But so Heather is with the group, and so I interviewed Chuck Zukowski and Heather about this new show. Hopefully you've been enjoying it. It's pretty good, pretty interesting, and they are making some new discoveries here and there on the show. I think every episode, maybe one episode, they didn't find anything new, but on the others they did. So it's a great show. Chuck's a lot of fun, so a really fun interview.
Yeah, that's
Have you
great.
interviewed Chuck?
I believe I have.
The UFO nut?
I believe I have. It was quite a while ago, if I recall.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that there's over a 50% chance that I did.
Yeah, probably. And he'll be at the UFO Congress. You'll be able to meet him there. He's always a lot of fun. So he'll be at the Congress. In fact, I was just at Alien Con last weekend, and his sister was there, Linda. So his sisters have gotten involved with all of this. His whole family is starting to get involved with this. It's so funny. And, of course, his sister, Debbie Ziegelmeyer, she is one of the board members of MUFON, and she was a state director in Missouri, and we've had her on the show a few times, but Debbie's great too.
Awesome. Great.
So that is the show, but getting into UFO news. So you and I always talk about UFO news. What do you got for us, buddy?
Well, I think this is really great. I think meet Silicon Valley's UFO hunters, and it's about us. It's in Vice.com motherboard tech by Vice. So you can find that online, and it's about a group of venture capitalists and technologists believe that humans can capture and reverse engineer UFOs, and that trying to do so might be a good investment.
Did you see
Can you
who
believe
the
that?
author
Venture
is?
capitalists are getting into this.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it. So,
did you see who the author of the article is?
Oh, MJ.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, how about that? I did miss that. Yeah, that's great. All right.
So MJ is someone that Martin and I interview. He is kind of into the sociological side of things. Very interesting young man. And, he's been on both of our shows recently even.
That's right. Yeah. So he goes on to say with U.S. Navy pilots coming forward to talk about their encounters with anomalous aerial vehicles, UFO hunters are starting to feel vindicated. And the cross-section of technologists who are also UFO enthusiasts believe that they not only exist, but we can make significant scientific breakthroughs by studying them. So I may pronounce this gentleman's first name wrong. Wazwan Verk. He runs Play Labs at MIT. He is also a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, angel investor, author of the Simulation Hypothesis, and he finds UFOs compelling as a technologist and scientist. And here's a quote by him: "I'm interested in the phenomenon because I believe mainstream science may have only discovered 5% of the truth about reality, and the other 95% is still out there." In an interview. I agree with that. I think there's just so much to know that we don't know, just for what we can experience. For one thing, you think about it, the spectrum that we actually see in is very small, and what we see around us and know what that's around us is just a fraction of what's really happening. And I've also wondered, I'm going off a little bit on a tangent here, but I've also wondered, as technology grows, are we going to see more and more? We're seeing these UFO encounters with the Navy because of new technology. So, but anyway, it's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think that...
Yeah, go ahead.
Or did you have more? Were you continuing?
Well, there's some other things in this article. It's a great article. I encourage anyone to check it out, and it will be up on your website. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the front page of openminds.tv, great article. And so excited that MJ is writing for Vice. This is his second UFO story, I believe, on Vice, so which is really cool. It's a good outlet, gets a lot of eyeballs. But it is really interesting, these guys looking into writing about or trying to discover what technology they can develop off of observations of UFOs. There's others, of course. That's the inspiration for Robert Bigelow, who was the guy who created Bigelow Aerospace and did paranormal investigations for years. In fact, he was contracted by the Pentagon to do UFO investigations. Some of the people at MUFON. So, for instance, in a couple weeks is a MUFON symposium, and we'll be there with a table. But the one of the speakers is John Schuessler, who was a mentor of mine because he was in charge of MUFON when I joined MUFON and was helping with the board and everything. And he, just so anybody who doesn't know, that's a Mutual UFO Network, kind of the largest civilian UFO investigation organization. And he was also inspired by the same thing to get involved. So was Bob Wood, an engineer who's also part of the MUFON board. And essentially, back in the day, like Schuessler worked for NASA. He would, I think at Johnson Space Center, have these paper lunch, sack lunch meetings where you could come in and eat lunch, and he would talk about UFOs at NASA. But this was kind of all of their interest, which is really interesting. So there's a couple follow-up stories that are related too. So another story that came out this week is from Tyler Rogaway, who we've been talking about pretty much weekly because he's been covering all of this stuff, and he's a defense writer for the War Zone. He wrote another article with Brett Tingley, and in this article he's talking about patents. So along the lines, there are some patents out there regarding technology that is extremely advanced, theoretical, and could be essentially what some of these people believe the UFOs are using. Now, what's interesting about this article is these are patents that were placed by the Navy. And in some of these patents, they are inspired by some of the work of Hal Puthoff. And that's important because they've kind of been inspired by ATIP, by this Pentagon UFO project. Hal Puthoff was one of the contractors who worked with Bigelow and wrote these papers for this ATIP project, which was kind of theorizing around how UFOs might be able to fly or technologies might be able to be developed. Well, this gentleman, Dr. Salvatore Cesar Pais, is an engineer and a scientist with the Navy, and he has put in these patents for these different technologies. And essentially, Tyler Rogaway is covering it, and he's saying that these patents, what he discovered is the patents were essentially kind of silly. They were theoretical, but that the technologies that are mentioned in them are just not even close. We're not even nowhere near even being able to figure out if these sort of things could work at all. And usually you don't get a patent for something like that. But there was a...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So there was a petition by one of the officers in the Navy, a chief technical officer, who said, hey, the Chinese are already working on this, and we're doing experiments that will show some of this is legit. That's why you need to issue these patents. And it worked. So they went forward with these patents. And so it's a really interesting situation. They're saying the Chinese are working on this, but we don't know. Another guy who's into UFOs, and this is related to MJ's story too, because his name is Deep Prasad. He is a physicist. He's gotten more involved with online conversations about UFOs. He's been following us. He'll probably listen to this show. But he is a Silicon Valley guy. I mean, he's a startup guy. He's young. He's just like 23 years old, but he's very, very intelligent and has created these companies, startup companies on different technology. But he's essentially one of the guys that MJ's story is about, one of these young guys who is in startups trying to get started. Now, he says, again, what he finds significant about Tyler's story about these patents, Tyler Rogoway's story in the War Zone, is that he says these patents are ridiculous. They never should have been passed because the technology is so advanced. Well, it's so theoretical, and some parts of it are definitely wrong and not possible. And even if some of these things could be achieved, the amount of power that would be required is astronomical, literally, on the level of like what a star could produce. He even invokes this K theory, this theory that Michiyo Kaku talks to, where an advanced civilization, there's a type 1, a type 2, a type 1 essentially can harness the power of the sun, and how we're not even close to a type 1. But if these patents were to work, we would have to be a type 2 society, which is hundreds, if not thousands of years in the future. But he makes this point, which I think is important, is if they are submitting these patents and the Navy is doing this, it indicates that the Navy either believes the Chinese are working on this and some of these objects are Chinese or are Chinese. He thinks that's probably highly unlikely because, you know, like we said, we're not a type 2 civilization and neither are the Chinese. They're back there with us, less than a type 1. But that it demonstrates the Navy is taking this very seriously and that they believe that these objects are there, that this technology as it exists and it's being exhibited in these objects that are being observed. So he believes that the mainstream media and the Silicon Valley and scientists need to take this more seriously, that this demonstrates that the Navy's all in. They believe that this is happening. These technologies exist. And Deep is saying, yes, these technologies, he also believes, do exist. So if they exist, we really need to take it more seriously and figure out who the heck is flying them and how they work. So essentially, he's saying this demonstrates even more than anything that the Navy's taking this UFO situation seriously. There is potentially some scientific discoveries that could be made, and that we all need to be working together to figure this out. I think it's really interesting.
It really is. And also, one of their patents talks about a lack of water skin friction if this thing was underwater. In other words, it could move through either air, space, water, mediums. I think Elizondo talked about the mediums in one of his talks. And by being enclosed in basically a vacuum plasma bubble sheath and coupled with effects of EM field-induced air and water particles, repulsion, and vacuum energy polarization. I mean, it's really fascinating to even picture that something can move through water, air, and space all at the same speeds.
Right, and that's what's great about these articles, because I'm certainly no scientist, even though I'm a science enthusiast and I understand some things, but certainly not to the degree of all of this. But Tyler Rogoway got into it, and Deep gets into it even further, talking about just what you're talking about. This where they can kind of create these magnetic fields using like superconductors that work at room temperature, and but he talks about how that technology that you just described would take so much energy in the manner in which these patents are talking about that it's not realistic at all. I mean, it would rip apart our planet if we were able to harness that kind of energy in the manner that these patents talk about. So that's why he feels, that it's preposterous, which kind of just demonstrates how we just don't get it. We just do not understand how they do what they do. There's something that we just are not understanding, which makes sense if they're really advanced compared to what we have.
The only thing I can think of that could have that type of energy is antimatter. That is antimatter is supposed to be. Don't even try. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm far from being a scientist myself. But it's, I just can't imagine, when you're talking about that type of energy, possibly there is a way to harness that type of energy that we just can't even fathom at this point.
Or it might not even be about harnessing the energy or a different type of energy or some way tapping into energy in a different way. Or a technology that doesn't even use that amount of energy. It could be something completely different that we just don't get, which is probably it. that we just do not get it. So
a workaround. Yeah.
But it's exciting. What's exciting is like Rogueway makes a point, and people get frustrated with Rogueway because he keeps entertaining and working toward this idea. Maybe it's Chinese or Russian. We have to do that. It's good that he's doing that. But then he'll interview people and be like, well, there's no way it could be Chinese or Russian. So he's doing what we're supposed to be doing, which is examining what the heck this all could be. And so it's exciting to see Deep and these Silicon Valley guys all going off of the premise that, hey, it's no longer in question whether these technologies exist or are out there and we're observing them. They do exist. We are observing them. We need to figure out what they are. So it's such a huge step, compared to just denying that it exists at all, that it's really just such a interesting paradigm shift, in thought.
Absolutely.
Pretty exciting
totally amazing
stuff. So, the latest episode of Unidentified covered the nukes, the nuclear, UFOs around nuclear facilities. And I think that's really interesting that they went there. It makes me wonder, though, does this mean that they're kind of now doing new research to the stars, which Lou Elizondo is part of and Unidentified is covering, or is this stuff from the past? And I think that is not necessarily clear. If, did the Pentagon look at these things? If so, what did they discover? I mean, those are some questions I think would be interesting in this episode. And the History Channel put up a story. Why have there been so many UFO sightings near nuclear facilities? And so they kind of cover this, and they cover some of Robert Hastings' stuff. Robert Hastings doesn't trust television, so he won't work with TV shows. But Robert Hastings is a guy who's kind of focused on all this stuff and is kind of the expert on all of this in a credible way. He's great. But they also, in this episode, they cover, some of the more well-known cases, and they cover Rendlesham. Now, they got the timeline wrong on Rendlesham, which I thought was interesting. They got a little mixed up on what happened when, but they did have Charles Halt and they had John Burroughs, and the aspect that they tackled, which you don't see, and I don't think any other show is tackled, is the physical effects. So they covered how John Burroughs had some medical issues he believes stems from his encounter with a UFO in 1980. And that at the Rendlesham Forest, you'll have to look it up if you don't know. Of course, we've had Burroughs on. We've broke a lot of this news, or at least covered it thoroughly back in the day, and Charles Halt. But essentially, when he went to the VA to say, hey, I think I have some medical issues stemming from something that happened when I was in the service, they came back to him and said, well, your records don't show you were in the Air Force at that time, and your medical records are sealed. So really mysterious. They even got John McCain's assistant on the show to talk about how she helped John Burroughs and helped to get his records corrected to show that, yes, he indeed was in the Air Force during those times, but how they never could get his medical records. And she had talked about how this is something we usually worked with these vets when they had problems with the VA administration, and this was the weirdest case she ever ran across. So a great episode. It's a great article on the History Channel around all of this. But Burroughs' experience was so strange. It's still a mystery why his records were sealed like that.
Yeah, I always thought that was so bizarre. Now, I have not caught this last episode. I'm planning on watching it. But so, are they actually tying Rendlesham Forest in with the nukes, or is this just a separate? Because
we didn't know it. What's that?
Well, because I know when you asked if you ever asked Charles Halt if there were nukes there, he said I'm not going to answer that.
But they do go into.
I thought it was more or less. What's that?
Well, but we already know, like I've said, we know there were nukes there. We know there were weapons there, and they do confirm that in the show and talk about that in the show, how there were nuclear weapons at the base. And that, in fact, the object they encountered, the bright light that went over the weapons storage area and beamed the the weapons storage area where those weapons were held. They cover all that.
Yeah, how about that? Wow, interesting.
Yeah, really interesting stuff. But you got a good point that those weapons were unacknowledged for a long period of time. And like you said, I don't think to this day HALT will even go there.
Right. I believe you're right. Last time I spoke with him. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we're out of time for our first segment here. So thank you very much for joining us, Martin.
You're very welcome.
All of these headlines you can see on the front page of openminds.tv. But let's go ahead and get to our interview. And after this short break, we'll be back with Chuck Zukowski and Heather Taddy of Travel Channel's Alien Highway. So stay tuned. I am very happy to welcome back to the show for the first time Heather Taddy. Hello, Heather.
Hello.
And maybe for the umpteenth time, Chuck Zukowski.
Hello.
Chucky
How you doing,
Z.
Alejandro?
Chucky Z, like I like to say. But I want to start off saying that the show is excellent, guys. I really like it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are great on it. The first episode was Skinwalker, and I guess we'll start there. From what I saw in some of the material out there, Skinwalker was not planned to be the first episode in the beginning. Is that true?
Do you want to take that, Heather? Or you want me to?
I don't know that I know the answer to that question. You take it.
Okay. Well, generally, they're showing these episodes out of sequence and how we shot them. Mm-hmm. So it must be based on all the cool stuff that we experienced in different states, and then how they're deciding to air them on the Travel Channel. So it is kind of confusing where it'll say Escape from Area 51 is episode 8. Where in actuality that was our episode 8. That was the last one we shot, but they are going to, or already shown that. So
it's kind of mixed up and out of
that's
sequence.
Tomorrow. That's right. It's coming up tomorrow. I don't even know what's on anymore.
Well, it's hard to know when they're mixing them up, which isn't necessarily bad. I think it was smart to do Skinwalker first, especially because of the tie-in with To the Stars and the ATIP program, which you all covered. So I thought it was genius to have that one first, and for you all even to do that and be sure to tie it in with the government program and everything.
When we first started putting this program together, Rick Sassons, who actually worked with Heather back in Paranormal State days, he's the creator of the show. When he talked to me last year, he says, what do you want to do? What type of investigations do you want to do? Where do you want to go? So I gave him all these ideas. And one of them was the Skinwalker Ranch. But I said, I don't want to go into the ranch because I hear there's a lot of stuff happening around the ranch. So we don't actually have to go in the ranch to experience what people, are talking about. Isn't that right, Heather?
We actually interviewed a Native American elder, and he told us about this incredible experience he had with a craft where another neighbor had seen this same thing. But basically, he saw this craft above his house, and he saw this red beam of light coming from it. And he said 2 weeks after he saw it, he felt like the constant feeling of electricity going through his body.
Yeah, and
wow.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I kind of was hoping they would put him in because he's a Ute Indian elder. What I really liked is when we were interviewing him, the Ute Native American tribe actually has a word for UFO in their vocabulary. They have a word for Bigfoot, and it's not Sasquatch, it's whatever word in Ute language. But while I was talking to them, they actually have a word for UFO, and they have a word for alien. But when I talked to him about the word for alien, he stopped. He says, "No, I can't mention that on camera. I can't talk about that because he needed to get approval from the tribe council, to be able to talk with us and to discuss certain things, which was pretty cool. But the Ute American tribe has got their own words for UFOs and aliens, which I thought was pretty cool, considering it goes back generations and generations and generations.
Mm-hmm. That is pretty interesting. Now, it seems like the show is tackling quite a bit. I mean, Alien Highway, your background, a lot of UFO and alien stuff, right?
Yeah, and some ghost stuff. We got to keep Heather busy too.
Yes.
Right. And so that's where I was kind of getting at. Heather, we've talked exhaustively with Chuck over the years. But you're someone that you're new. This is your first time on the podcast, for instance, and your background is more of the paranormal ghost stuff, which is stuff Chuck and I used to do together back in the day. But I mean, not something that we're as well known for. How was it for you when you were approached in participating with something that had more UFO and alien stuff in it? I mean, were you open to it? Were you kind of like thinking, uh-oh, you're going to hook me up with some weirdo?
I mean, I was totally open to it because I, too, since I was young, have had an interest in this. It's not something I know as well as the paranormal or something I've pushed my focus to studying as much, but it's definitely something that I wanted to, learn more about. So yeah, I mean, I was super pumped to join the team, and I remember hearing about Chuck. I had read an article a long time ago about one of his cattle mutilations that he investigated. So I knew that he was like well versed on this subject. So I was excited to and I also knew that this show would take us to some pretty cool places.
Right.
And I'll give you that $50 I just bribed you with, okay? Saying that.
Okay.
So you're also a horror movie fan. What are some of your favorite alien horror movies?
Oh, Alien. Ooh. That's tricky. I'd probably say Alien. The first Alien definitely is one high up on my list, but I mean, when I first got into horror movies, the first film that really inspired me more than anything was 1978's Halloween. That's probably one of my all-time favorite horror movies, but as far as relating to aliens, I'd say Alien. I definitely love all those movies.
Which is pretty dang terrifying.
It is.
Yeah, it really is.
So what do you think is scarier, aliens or ghosts?
I would definitely say aliens because we don't really know what we're dealing with. We're dealing with advanced technology, and we don't know if we as humans are even prepared to deal with something like this if it occurs. If aliens start invading Earth, like what do we do? So that's definitely more terrifying to me because we don't know what they're all about.
And plus, you've done so much paranormal investigation. Do you even get that scared now looking when you're ghost hunting?
Honestly, no. And it's something I've always been really brave about. Even when I was a teenager, I would be leading my friends into these haunted abandoned buildings. And for some reason, I just always thought nothing could hurt me. And I was always so intrigued by it that it never really frightened me. I was always so fascinated. So I definitely... Yeah, I did. And especially now since I've been on so many investigations in so many different areas, it's just kind of like, it's as if I'm desensitized from it now.
I totally get it, because that's how I felt, eventually down the way ghost hunting. Now, I've seen Truck just rolled up in a corner crying out of fear. No, just kidding. He's been pretty brave about this stuff.
He saw me.
He saw me. Well, and getting into that on the show. Okay, so the show's a lot of fun. Of course, Skinwalker was really straightforward, and it's funny to see Chuck being so serious for so long. Luckily, in the trailers for upcoming episodes, you saw more joking around and stuff. And that's, you guys must be having, and it sounds like you have a pretty good rapport already. It's hard not to have a good rapport with Chuck. It sounds like you're having fun.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this whole experience has been fun, from hanging out with Chuck and Dan to hanging out with our production crew. Like, everybody vibes pretty well, and we all have a really great sense of humor. So we've definitely had some good laughs along the way.
So on these shows, a lot of time talking about getting scared about different things, the crew often seem to be the ones who get the most frightened because, they're not the paranormal investigators. So have you been finding that out, or is your crew kind of seasoned, or...
I think our crew definitely is very, very seasoned. Doug Segal, who is the showrunner, actually produced 3 major motion pictures, and he's doing TV. And then Mitch Marcus, phenomenal director. And then our crew has been all over the world working for different people. Neil Fernandez, the head cameraman, I guess what they call him?
Director of photography.
Yeah, director of photography. Just fantastic. But I got to tell you, and this is such a cute story. I mean, because we were in Missouri shooting, and we're all blacked out, autos, lights and everything, so we can see if these balls of light show up. And I had my iPad connected to my camera, so I was watching my iPad. And David, the sound guy, is beside me. Going, "Look, will you turn that thing off? I can't see." and what it was I looked over and I'm going, "Really?" And then I got thinking, "Oh my gosh, the crew! I mean, they get so involved in what we were doing that it was really a lot of fun because they became an extension of our team basically too, because Robert or David caught some anomalies on his microphone. We had a couple of the different cameramen actually capture anomalies on their cameras too. So it was an extension of our team.
And that's hilarious because he's a sound guy, and you're like, you're just getting the sound. What do you care about the light? But he's looking for these balls of light, I guess, right?
Exactly. But it was just, at first I kind of thought, what's going on? And then I realized, my gosh, he's having, he's into this. He's just not working, but he's involved with this investigation, and that's how I think our team was. It wasn't like they were just like bored walking around. Okay, when's this going to be done? Everybody was, and Heather can chime in on this too. But in my opinion, the way I saw it, the whole team, and we had, including us, we had like 12 to 14 people out there, and they were all just like so involved in our investigations.
Yeah, I think everybody was excited about this subject, and there were even times when our camera guys in future episodes, they catch stuff and they're like, we're doing something and we're not even ready to film yet, and they'll see something and get so excited and hurry up and like turn on their camera to get it.
Wow, that's fun. So how was this, Heather, compared to your previous work on other shows? I mean, with the more broad topics, what was the difference that you maybe picked up on?
Well, with Paranormal State, we were going into families' homes where, they were terrified. They had something in their house they couldn't explain. There were kids involved. They didn't even feel comfortable sleeping in their house. So a lot of times it got really emotional going to a lot of those cases, because even when we'd leave, we were college students and we'd have to think like, I wonder if this family got better. I wonder if, they took the advice that we gave them and they're doing better. So it really like affected you in the long run. Whereas this, I feel like it's more of an adventure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
like we're discovering new things. Yeah. So I mean, I love doing both, but this one's definitely more of an adventure, and you're spending way more time outside, and you have to think of wild animals, which I never had to think of before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, when I originally pitched the show, and the reason why I went with Rick is because, since the book it came out, The 37th Parallel, I must have been hit at least 18 times from production companies. Hey, we got this project you would be good for. Or we have this, we have that. Rick contacts me and goes, I want to do something with you, but what do you want to do? And I'm going, oh, I like this. Mm-hmm. And I said, first off, I don't do green screens. So you can just, and I'm a field investigator, so I got to go and we talk to real people, real places, real investigations, and we run it like a real investigation. And you can ask Heather that or even she can confirm this, that when you see us on TV interviewing, the witnesses, we are actually interviewing the witnesses. The both directors, they say, okay, here's the guys. This is, we already know what's going on a little bit, and then we go in and we interview them as investigators. So there's no script or anything. We're doing it like a field investigator would. I think it's coming across that way, at least from a few people that have contacted me, going, "Hey, you're pretty good at reading cue cards." And I'm going, it's just we have a good crew, and they're just letting us run an investigation, and they're just there to document it.
Mm-hmm. Which is fun. That's what was partially, maybe, I may be biased, I guess, a little bit, in that I've been out in the field with you, and it does feel like that. I mean, it felt like, like we used to do with the out there, it felt like, okay, what do we do next? We found this, so it did feel natural like that. I mean, it didn't feel staged, or that you were directed in your investigation, which I think is definitely...
I know, and we were, some new stuff would pop up from time to time, and then we'd have to do a real quick, camera, something on the camera, just so we could do a transition. But that was it. Everything else was just totally ran like an investigation, and I really appreciated our directors for letting us do that, because it came across for me very, very easy that there was certain, there were some times where I had to say some certain words just because in their mind, there was a transition, and I'm still apologizing to Heather, to Taddy Banks for losing my cool one day, just because
on the last episode.
Oh my God,
I've been there too.
Oh my gosh, it's we were pulling 10, 11-hour days at least.
Yeah, I mean, we were out on the road for like a month,
Yeah, it was all snow. I mean, a lot of the places we were, in less than 30 degrees worth of weather, and then so you just, it's not that it just builds up, but you want to make sure you do a good job. You want to make sure that you get the information out, that you want to get the information out properly, and if you just happen to be driving in traffic and they want you to do that, it gets a little stressful.
Right. So I want to ask you this, Heather, and I mainly want to start with you because, I've talked more with Chuck, but also to get a kind of an outsider perspective on this, and someone who's been involved with the paranormal, is this kind of weird situation we have ourselves in where, like in your first episode, you're referring to Pentagon, paranormal research. And that's what I loved about your show, because a lot of people don't know that they did not just UFOs, but a whole gamut of paranormal research. What is that like for you? How do you feel about that?
You mean knowing that the Pentagon is studying this?
Yeah, that the Pentagon has done this investigation, that you guys were looking at, this ranch where they did some paranormal investigation. I mean, that's weird, to have we're where the government was doing investigation.
Yeah, and it's crazy too when you think about Robert Bigelow. I mean, they basically had a laboratory in there for years studying this, and you're wondering what, all these NASA people and these really intelligent scientists, they're taking time to study this, so they obviously think that something's going on. But I mean, it was incredible, because I remember when that Pentagon, the New York Times story came out. It was that was a year before we started filming.
Yeah.
But no, I was just really surprised, about it.
Now, does it make you suspicious, or does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel positive that perhaps the government will start to take, what you do more seriously?
Definitely, yeah, because, I mean, most people, when you tell them you do this, they're like, oh, they just, laugh at you. So it is great to see all these stories and people like you doing these podcasts to get all the information out. But it also, too, it made me really believe that Roswell was covered up in some way.
Interesting.
Ooh.
So what about you, Chuck? I mean, now that, I think we talked early on. Of course, we've had tons of discussions about Bigelow over the years, and you've had, tried to get some analysis done with them and things like this. How are you feeling about this kind of ongoing release of information about what the Pentagon looked into?
I enjoy it, because what it's doing is it's validating what we're doing as investigators and researchers, and what you're doing with Open Minds and the Ufo Congress, getting the information out to the public. Now the public is going, hey, guess what? Those guys aren't just crazy. the Pentagon's been doing this. They've been doing their own research and investigation. Last week you had 3 or 4 congressmen were briefed about UFOs from some Navy fighter pilots, and so you're seeing more and more of this information go public, and the people are contacting me going, yeah, I knew something was going on. But I'm really happy. I don't know if this is the beginning of releasing it all to the public, but it sure looks like it's a good start, to get it out there that we've been visited forever, pretty much.
So Lou Elizondo, who used to run the Pentagon program, has said, and others have backed this up, that they were looking at Skinwalker, and you guys do a great job, covering what that was, but Skinwalker had a gamut of paranormal things going on there, and that's what they were looking at, lots of paranormal. But according to them, religious factions, especially inside the intelligence agencies and the government, put the kibosh on that. They felt it was demonic and that we shouldn't go there. And I find that fascinating. So the only thing that they were able to continue looking into was, these military UFO cases. How do you feel about that? And let's start with Chuck.
Well, I don't know. I mean, we have a Freemason symbol on our dollar bill. Mm-hmm. So, that's the culture of this country. Yeah. And I do get emails from time to time, and just one recently where, they're saying, this one particular person saying, well, these aliens that you're investigating, they're actually demons, or angels from hell, and on and on. And I said, well, I don't know. I can't say yes or no to that. But as far as I know, they're you could touch them. You could they're humanoid, and they're not well, it's kind of hard to say without trying to get into religion on a podcast. But basically, they're no different than us, other than the fact they're from another planet, or maybe they're from the inner planet. Who knows? But what we're trying to do is we're just trying to find evidence of what's out here, and I really don't care if there's 4 aliens or 1 species or 10 different species. I just want to find one, and we can go from there and try to understand what's actually going on out here. But you're right, I've seen that, and I'm not quite sure why, when you get into the religious aspect, they kind of pull away.
Mm-hmm. Now, Heather, aliens, people thinking aliens are demonic or something like that, that's one thing. That's a little harder for them to kind of... It's kind of more obscure because aliens are aliens. But with what you research, you actually do look for demons, or you do look for ghosts and other things like this. How did you feel hearing that, this just isn't palatable for people inside of the government because of religious beliefs?
Yeah, I mean, I've never really agreed with the theory that aliens are demonic. I've never just, how do you even prove that? It just seems, like you said, obscure to me. From my studies and my experiences dealing with demonic phenomena, usually when it's with a person, it's not going to occur unless an individual grants permission for, this to enter their life. Mm-hmm. So I mean, when I hear people say that, I'm just thinking maybe they're, especially the government, maybe they don't have an explanation for it. So they turn to, maybe it's the demonics because they're not educated on the subject, I guess.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Well, and it's unfortunate because, regardless of what the phenomena is, if the phenomena exists, which of course you all believe, that's why you're involved with it, and certainly I think there's something to it, that's why we need to look into it. It's kind of concerning to think that, the government and perhaps other, major institutions will kind of lend a blind eye to something that I think is even science can be applied to in this day and age because of religion.
Well, that and other things too. I mean, just within the last week or so, there in the Astrophysical Journal, There are some scientists that looked at 1,300 stars closest to the Earth and found no obvious evidence of extraterrestrial life. And what they were doing was what SETI's been doing for a long time. They've just been monitoring radio waves.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a group of scientists, like you said, or a group of individuals first that will look at maybe the religious aspects of UFO investigations or aliens or whatever. Then you have another group of scientists that seem to think that we are still the center of the universe, and everything and every other planet is going to evolve just like us, which is so, 1400s, 1500s medieval thinking. It really is. So if you got a bunch of scientists out there that are looking for radio waves coming from other planets, they're assuming that that those aliens evolved like us by using radio, and that's not the case. We don't know. And I don't see, as long as you've been doing this, Alejandro, and as long as I've been doing this, have we ever picked up radio waves from UFOs?
Yeah, and I think that you make a great point, because that sometimes science can kind of mirror religion. They hold on to these concepts based on belief rather than evidence, because kind of like what you're saying, we have zero evidence that any other civilization out there would use the same technologies we've used in the past, yet some of these scientists kind of hold on to that belief without the evidence.
Yeah, and it really doesn't make sense. I mean, if you were a detective, investigating a homicide, and you would go in there with the notion, well, this is how I would kill this person, and I'm only going to look for evidence that way. You know how many criminals would be released, or they would never have been captured. So you can't do that. Mm-hmm. And you have to, when it comes to UFOs, and this, and Heather's learning this even with ghost investigations, is you got to think way out of the box. We have to think about what type of evidence is being left and how we can find that evidence to validate the existence of UFOs or ghosts at this particular location.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we're essentially out of time. So let's go ahead and take a break right now, and then we'll be back with Chuck and Heather of Alien Highway on the Travel Channel. An awesome new show. I really love the first episode, and I know it's going to get more and more fun as time goes on. So we'll be right back. Those of you listening on the radio, you'll hear a commercial break. Those of you listening to the podcast will hear a short musical interlude. We'll be right back. We are back. You're listening to Open Minds UFO Radio, and I am here with Chucky Zukowski, and Heather Taddy of Alien Highway. And during the break there, we were talking about, I guess they wanted me to sing or something. They were bored because they can't hear the music that you all hear. But Chuck, you mentioned that you guys sang a lot.
We did, because my truck is the cast truck, and Heather's in the band, and my son Daniel, who couldn't make it tonight because he just got back from Slovenia, working with the National Guard here. We were in a band also, and so we would sing, and it's actually kind of funny. Eventually, they would turn the mics off because the rest of the crew didn't want to hear us sing. But I think we kind of hit everything from country western to hard rock stuff.
Really?
Yeah, I remember in December when we filmed an episode before Christmas, you guys were really into the Christmas songs.
Oh yeah, because my family, what we do is we get together for Christmas, and we have all our equipment here in the house, so we just break out the guitars and the drums, and we just sing Christmas songs, and it gets everybody in the mood. So we were doing that before Christmas, and we were stuck in the snow anyway most of the time, so we felt at home in it.
In Colorado. So did you get to visit his house during Christmas, Heather?
No, but I did see a video of his Christmas light display. It's pretty incredible. His
crazy alien Christmas. He's the guy that has all the lights, the neighbor who's the one-upper. Oh my gosh. Yeah. People, I think they can go on Facebook and probably see pictures, right?
Yeah. And you know what? And I'm just going to let you know, secretly, some of those lights flash binary signals out there, So, it's the whole Christmas light thing is just a ruse. I'm actually communicating.
Really? Have you gotten any responses?
Just from the neighbors.
Right. Are your neighbors aliens?
or alienated.
Right, they're definitely alienated.
Yeah,
So getting into
much.
your family, so you have now this paranormal family. It's hilarious because, of course, there's you. Then early on in your investigations, you found out your sister Debbie was into all of this. She's been with MUFON for many, many years. She's a board member, which is about as high as you can get in MUFON. Now you've got your sisters who are helping out MUFON as well. One of them I spent the weekend with at Alien Con. She was running the table there, Linda, and your other sister helps her out often. And now you've got your son involved.
Well, both my sons and then my daughter. So I have two sons, Chuck and Daniel, and then my daughter Ashley. I think they just got involved by association because as they were growing up, I was doing UFO research and investigations, and then when we bought our first RV, we would go on vacation by way of Roswell, by way of Taos, by way of Aztec or Dulce, and every time we went on vacation, I stopped the vacation, the route to wherever we were going. I made sure that I was able to pull off an investigation or two. So they just kind of got associated with that. Dan's been on some investigations with me in the past. My son Chuck has, and then Ashley also. So now with Heather here, she's just like part of the family too.
Yep.
Yeah.
The second daughter you always wanted.
Oh my God, this one's bad enough.
Well, and that's the thing is your kids probably were not happy. You probably got a lot of eye rolling and, Dad, come on, Dad.
Well, the last episode, when we were in New Mexico, and we're all walking together, and Heather and Dan, and I'm behind them, and we're walking through the woods looking for a cave. I think Dan was telling Heather the story about how, one particular vacation, we hit all these ancient Native American sites. And because what I was doing is I was looking for, any type of pictographs or anything that looked like that might be associated with UFOs. And they hated it, and they called it the ruined vacation because we were hitting all these Native American ruins. And then later on in life,
that's cute. Ruined vacation.
Yeah, and then later on in life, as he got older, he realized, how much he actually learned from it, and that he was really happy that we did that. But with little kids, they're like, "Really, we got to go to another Chaco Canyon?"
Yeah. Unless the kids get to decide and it's Disneyland, they really hate anything anyway. And then later in life, we realize, it was really cool when we went and looked at that stuff. I'm going to make my kids do it despite what they want to do.
Well, oh my God, a giant talking mouse? That's paranormal by itself.
All right.
That's scary.
So how has your family been, Heather, with your paranormal fame that probably kind of rubs off on them and they get questions as well?
So I've always been super weird, even as like a child. In third grade, my teacher called me an alien. He wouldn't even call me by my name.
Really?
He called me alien. Yeah, because I was just so different from everybody else, and I would always order the alien abduction books from the book club that we would get to order books from, and I guess no one else, would order them, and he just always called me an alien. And then I made up this whole story about the planet I came from, and I drew it out because I thought it was funny. But my parents, they think it's great. They think it's really cool to see me on TV, and I think they kind of always knew that I'd be doing something relating to TV, because growing up I was always filming things, and I always had a video camera in my hand. I was always documenting my life. So I think they always kind of knew I'd be doing something out of the ordinary.
Well, that's cool. So it's kind of par for the course. It's kind of like you made it to what you should be doing.
Yeah, and they joke about it all the time. Like, it's funny.
And how do they feel about the paranormal? Are they into it, or they just kind of roll their eyes and feel like it's your thing?
My mom is really scared of it, and she's always like, how do you do this? How do you do that? She's super terrified from it, but she likes seeing her daughter on TV, so that's cool. But my dad, he's really interested in it, and he's actually had experiences when he was a truck driver for a long time, so he was always having experiences where he thought he would see UFOs.
So
he's really into it.
That's funny, because my sister's like that. She is so terrified of it all, especially the ghost stuff, that she gets too scared to watch some of it. So I can see that. It's funny how some people have that reaction, this utter fear. And you probably run into that quite a bit. You mentioned it earlier when you were doing Paranormal State, but did you run into that with the show? People that were just kind of terrified from whatever they experienced or witnesses that you talked to?
There's one episode that it hasn't aired yet for Alien Highway where we did have a client that was pretty terrified by things that he saw, and it actually kind of reminded me of a Paranormal State episode. That one I think is kind of last in the lineup, but we actually did catch some pretty good evidence on that one too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's going to be a really, really good episode because there's a twist to that episode, and anyway, I'm not going to tell you any much more about it, but wow, we captured a lot of evidence there too, which validates a lot of what not only he saw, but his neighbors around him saw too.
Mm-hmm. That's exciting. Yeah. Hopefully we can do this again, Chuck. There's no doubt. I'd imagine, unless you get too big for us, that you'll come back. But Heather, hopefully too. And we can talk about what happens in the episodes once the season's over. But talking, kind of more generally with the witnesses, I know for you, Chuck, and I would love to talk about this because I think, Heather, you probably, no doubt, have experience with this as well. But rapport building, I think that's something that, Chuck, you've definitely been good at, but not other paranormal investigation organizations are like that. But I think it's pretty important. How important do you think it is building rapport? I'd like to hear, both of your perspectives when it comes to, going on these investigations.
Well, it's like with law enforcement, there's different levels of how an officer handles things, and the first level is just appearance, just the way they look and how they present themselves, and that's usually what I try to do is how you're dressed, your attitude, how you present yourself when you first meet, someone, a witness or client, and because it's always those first impressions that they're going to think about. And once you have a good rapport with just an initial greeting, then you can start peeling information away. Sometimes it may take a little bit to actually get. There was one episode where this particular hunter had seen something, and he would not go on camera and say what he saw because people are going to think that he's crazy. And I talked with him for a while, and finally he opened up to, okay, yeah, I'm going to talk about it on camera. And I think a lot had to do with just not only talking to him and letting him know that other people had seen the same things that he saw that made him a little more comfortable. So some of that rapport also experience, has to come into play too. You just can't do that, on the first day of doing your first investigation with no experience at all. So what do you think about that, Heather?
I definitely say it is important to make them feel comfortable and, make them know they're not the only person dealing with these experiences, because a lot of times you're dealing with people who are super scared, sometimes kind of unstable. So I think it's really important to get to know them. And even with Paranormal State, there are a lot of times we did like extensive interviews. We did like 2-hour phone interviews before we would even decide to do a case, because it really helped us, piece things together. But we were always interviewing witnesses, previous owners, people that had come in contact with this activity. So it was always really important to make them feel comfortable, and that way, and don't always start the conversation with right away going into the paranormal. Like I would always make it a point to get to know them before we kind of dove into that, so they can kind of get a feel of, who I am, and then that makes them more comfortable opening up to me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you break the ice. You find some way of breaking the ice first. If it's just something goofy, unrelated, know. Like there was one guy that she was talking about. It turns out he drives a Dodge Ram 1500 like I do, and so when I met him for the first time, I said, "Oh, you got a Dodge 1500 just like mine. What do you think about it?" And we went into talking about trucks for a bit, and then eventually circled back into what we were actually there for.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Right. So Heather, I'm really curious about this, because when you're doing TV, it's sometimes it can be kind of scary, whoever they partner you up with, because often you have maybe some to no influence on, who you're partnering up with. And so you've just kind of got to trust the production company. What were your first impressions of Chuck? And did you have reservations? And how did that go?
Careful, I know where you live.
No, you don't.
Hey, quit threatening. No threats.
I'll find you.
Well, it's funny because I remember, because I hadn't, met Chuck until literally I met him in the hotel the first night we were, before we were supposed to film in Missouri, I think was the first episode we shot. So we had Skyped, and I remember we Skyped for 2 hours, and we talked about, our theories on the paranormal, and I got to know him a little bit. And I didn't really honestly have any reservations, because I knew that he had been a police officer. So right away I was like, he's serious. I know he has good investigation skills. So that was something that I thought about a lot. But no, I honestly didn't have any reservations. And I feel like we kind of hit it off right away. Even with Dan, I just feel like we all kind of meshed. It's amazing when the production, these casting directors think of people to pair up with, and we just click.
Mm-hmm. So they did a good job. Although, Chuck, he can get along with practically anybody. Practically. But, when I found out that Heather played in the band, and okay, it was like a grunge band, but that's okay. I listened to that too. But, the fact that she plays bass, and I thought, wow, cool. Already, other than, delving in the unknown, we had something in common that was outside, unrelated to that, which really helped out. Which was the first episode that was shot?
Oh, is that the one coming up? Is that Missouri Mayhem coming up?
The town one. Yeah, I think that one's later in the lineup.
Oh yeah, you're right. The town one is coming up. Right. That's the Missouri Mayhem. So that's probably coming up about somewhere. I don't know. I have no idea.
And then where was Skinwalker in the filming? Was that towards the beginning or in the middle?
Oh my gosh, that was the beginning of February we filmed that, right?
So early.
Yeah, because after Utah's one, we went over and filmed Tonopah, which is coming up tomorrow. Actually, that was afterwards. Gosh, it was
I think
California,
Utah
Arizona,
was
Tonopah,
fourth. Third or
I think
fourth.
It was fourth, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, just because of the feel to Skinwalker was pretty serious. Was that because it was early on, or because of the nature, the kind of gravitas of the location?
It was because what we experienced and what we saw.
Yeah.
And I don't think it had anything to do with what if it was the first episode we shot or the last one. And I'll let Heather talk about this too a little bit, but as an investigator, the lights in the sky, that was totally something I wasn't even expecting. I'm looking for evidence on the ground, and here the lights, the sky lights up, and there's a beam coming up, and oh my gosh! And then we have to worry about what's in the cemetery and what's gone through the cemetery and what we captured on our own game cameras. But there was just so much going on there. It was pretty cool. Go ahead, Heather. What do you think?
Yeah, there really wasn't, especially when we're in the cemetery, because we're hearing a growl. Dan is way up on this mountain. We see this crazy light behind him, and he doesn't know where it's coming. He knows it's coming from another ridge behind the first ridge, which that is Skinwalker Ranch. And then, so it's just we're all kind of separated, and all these things are happening, and And then the on the trap cams, the wolf, like we totally didn't expect to see that.
No, that was just crazy. And then some of the evidence never made it. We actually picked up a little bit of a conversation, on one of our cameras in the cemetery.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the one facing the cemetery that we hooked to a tree, right?
Yeah, right in the middle of the cemetery. It was facing. We picked up a little bit of a conversation. So these
like
are
some EVP type of activity.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Oh, and we got a couple of good EVPs that are going to be popping up too in the show. Yeah. So awesome. Heather stepped up her game, and we got some good stuff. Mm-hmm. Pretty excited about that.
She stepped up her ghosty calling.
Well, what I really like about having Heather on a team is, the whole reason why I got involved in ghost investigations or spirit investigations, what do you want to call them, is because I needed to know the difference between someone who claims they were being abducted by aliens and some that are actually there's a haunting or spirits in their house. So that's the whole reason I actually got into that. So having Heather there, it's like I don't have to think about it. It's like, okay, what do you think? There's one episode where it's a combination of both, and that's one of my theories that I've been kind of toying with for the past couple of years. Where if you really think about it, Alejandro, we look for ghosts using EMF meters, so there's an electromagnetic field that's associated with it. But we also use EMF meters when we have UFO sightings.
Right.
So if there's a large EM field presence somewhere that's maybe being associated with UFOs, that could attract ghosts. Mm-hmm. And maybe versa versa. If aliens saw this large signature, EM signature, they may go, "Hey, what's going on there?" And then so all of a sudden now you have a combination of both. And one of our episodes that occurred.
Mm-hmm. What other phenomena do you all look for in the show? So we've got ghosts, we've got UFOs, aliens. You had the wolfy guy show up. Kind of. What other things do you hunt for and or experience in the show?
Do you want to take that, Heather?
I gotta think for a minute on that.
Just kind of lifting off topic. Like, do you go look for Bigfoot or?
Well, okay, the episode tomorrow is, an informant relays a story of an alien that reported escape from Area 51. Basically, that's why we're in Tonopah, because we're looking for a creature. It could be an alien, or it could be an offspring of the alien, or could be something associated with the alien, or it could be a separate creature. So we've kind of went from UFOs to skinwalkers to creature investigations. We haven't hit Bigfoot yet, but there was an opportunity in Missouri when we were there. But literally, we just ran out of time. There was so much going on that we couldn't do that. And there was even a Mothman type sighting in near the area, one of the areas where we were doing an investigation, but they referred to it as Batman rather than Mothman. So we kind of touched that a little bit, but we just didn't have the time to further that investigation. And then we have You Tell Me. That's a joke between me and Heather. You'll understand when you see one of those episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then you definitely look for ghosts. And did you do any cattle mutilation kind of investigations, or?
Oh my gosh!
Forgot about this one.
Did you say "oh my gosh"?
Coming up on July 3rd, the day before
July
Independence Day.
On the Travel Channel.
On the Travel Channel, Murder on the Prairie, a series of mysterious animal deaths and UFO sightings brings Chuck to Colorado. Yay! I'm here in my home state.
Back home.
Yeah. And so, yes, we do one on animal mutilations.
Awesome.
Or strange animal deaths.
Well, we are out of time. This was a ton of fun getting to know you guys and to talk about the show. I want to say, I was so delighted because, as you guys know, it's really hard working with these different production companies. I kind of feel, that the majority of them just don't get it. When you're trying to do research, they want to do their own exciting thing. And so it's scary, and you never know what you're going to come up with. But I'm so happy that this show has turned out so well. I think it's great. I'm really excited for you guys, and I hope that it's super successful. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you, Alejandro. Oh, and by the way, our second episode, we got the highest ratings for Wednesday night.
Really?
On Travel Channel. Yeah, so
awesome.
We're pretty excited about that. And thank you for having us on, and thank you to all your listeners, too.
For sure.
I really appreciate sharing our information.
And Chuck, you know me well enough that if the show was kind of cruddy, that I would not be raving about it.
Not only that, you would have me on. Or you wouldn't have invited me to Congress, too.
No, well, I would have been wanting to help you promote it, but I wouldn't have been so excited about it. But
I'm really glad you're excited.
I'm super excited to have Chuck Zukowski at the UFO Congress, too. So we'll see you there. And I hope that, after the season's over, we can all catch up again and talk about some of your exciting adventures, including all of the amazing stuff that you captured at Skinwalker.
Definitely.
Boy, yeah. Maybe after the series is over, then we can go back and we can talk about all the fun stuff that we couldn't talk about.
We'll do that. Thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you, Alejandro. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you so much to Chucky Z and Heather T of the Travel Channel's Alien Highway. So, pretty good show. You got to check it out. It's on, let's see here, Wednesdays at 10 p.m. That is Pacific. So, Wednesdays, 10 p.m. Pacific on the Travel Channel. Unless you're like me, I stream everything, I mean. So, you can go online and use Sling or whatever you use to watch it. And in fact, I think they have some episodes on their website too, on the Travel Channel website, so you can check them out there. But so great to talk to my good friend Chucky Z again, and to meet someone new, Heather Taddy. So she was really cool. That was a lot of fun. So check out their show. It's a lot of fun also. I also want to thank Martin Willis for helping us out with the beginning of the show and talking about the news. You can check out Martin at Podcast UFO, and also all those news headlines we talked about you can find at openminds.tv. So go to the openminds.tv and you'll see them on the front page there, so you can get caught up. There's a lot more headlines there too that we're not even able to get into at the beginning of the show, so check those out. And then you can also follow us all over. We're all over. If you go to Open Minds or Alejandro Rojas on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, you'll also follow us or find us on all of those areas too, and be able to follow on a regular basis. In fact, I'm pretty active on Twitter, and I post quite a bit on Facebook as well. Mostly just keeping you guys up with the news and the headlines, so check that out. And of course, the UFO Congress is coming up. It's going to be so much fun. We have a lot of great people who are going to be speaking there. Of course, Kevin Day is someone that's signed up recently, or at least we've announced recently. He was a radar operator on the Princeton during the Nimitz encounters. Also, James Fox is going to be there, and he's going to be giving us some exclusive insight and looks into clips of interviews he's done. And we'll see if we could get some more information over time. But he's interviewed some really cool people for his upcoming documentary. So this is going to be a ton of fun too. So there's a lot of great stuff. Go to ufocongress.com to check out some of the cool people that we're going to have there. It's going to be the heart of downtown Phoenix. So this is going to be great. And I love doing these sort of things right in the downtown area, because it's just really bold. We're literally right next door to the media. We'll probably have a big media presence there, and it's just big and bold, saying, hey, this is a real thing here, and this is a 28th annual event, and you all have only really gotten interested in all of this in the last week or a few weeks, and by that I mean you all, the media. So come and join and see what this is all about, and talk to people who have been looking into this stuff for decades in some instances, including my own. So hopefully we'll see a lot of media there. I'm sure we will. We usually do. But the Congress is going to be a lot of fun. Also, this weekend, I'll be in Roswell. So hopefully some of you can make it. Of course, they have an annual festival out there that commemorates the crash of a mysterious object in the desert in 1947 outside of Roswell, more closer to the town of Corona, New Mexico. And so that's always a lot of fun. We'll be at the museum. I'll have a table there. I'll be doing several talks. So that's always a lot of fun if you can make it. It's certainly kind of a mecca for people interested in UFOs. it's something that you have to at least try once. So if this is your year to go for the first time, come by and say hello. I always love to talk to the listeners and say hello and answer any questions that you all have. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And it's a lot of fun to see some of our good friends. Don Schmidt, of course, he's the president of the board for the museum, the Roswell Museum. It's always good to see him out there. And a lot of our other good friends usually do talks out there as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Check out the UFO Festival is usually what they go by. In fact, I think that's the website, just ufofestival.com. Certainly, if you Google UFO Festival Roswell, you're going to find the website for everything going on there. So hopefully we can see you there as well. Otherwise, we've got more exciting interviews coming up, so we should have another exciting one this week. If you are a Patreon patron, by the way, thank you, Patreon patrons, for helping out. But if you do follow me there or on social media, I'll let you know I have a really good interview in store. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen next week or the week after, but it's something unique, something that really I don't think anybody else has that you're going to love. So keep an eye out on the social media for who that is, and hopefully we'll get that able to be recorded and slid in there next week. So a lot of cool stuff on the horizon, and thank you all so much for listening. Thank you to Caleb Hanks for the opening and close music, Systematics for the bumper music, and of course, thank you all the listeners for being here. Until next time, adios muchachos.
Your emotion